November 13, 2022. For college students, one house, one night. By morning, all four would be dead, and the person police would eventually arrest. A criminology PhD student who spent years studying how to catch killers. This is the story of the Idaho student murders, and what investigators discovered would shock the entire nation. Before we begin, guys, if you could leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel, I'd really appreciate it. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from right now? What time is it there? I'm really curious to know where my audience is. Alright, let's go. Moscow, Idaho. If you've never heard of it, it's a small college town in northern Idaho. Population around 25,000 people. Home to the University of Idaho. Rolling hills. Peaceful streets. The kind of place where people feel safe, where parents send their kids to college without a second thought. Moscow hadn't seen a murder in years. It was that kind of town. Until November 13, 2022. The house was at 1122 King Road. A white three-story rental home just blocks from campus. 6 students lived there. On the second floor lived Madison, Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves. Best friends since 6th grade. Both 21 years old. They'd just graduated and were planning to move to Austin, Texas together. They'd already found jobs, already made plans. On the third floor lived Xana, Kernodle, 20 years old. She was dating Chapin, also 20. Ethan didn't live at the house, but he stayed over frequently. And on the first floor lived 2 other roommates. They would survive. November 12, 2022, was a Saturday night. College town. Weekend. Party night. Kaylee and Madison went out to a local bar called the Corner Club. Security footage shows them there around 1:30 in the morning, smiling, dancing, having fun. Around 1:40 a.m. they left the bar and walked to a food truck called the Grub Truck. More security footage captured them there, ordering carbonara pasta, talking with friends, waiting for their food. Just a normal college night. Around 1:56 a.m. they got a ride home from a private party service. They arrived back at the King Road house just before 2 a.m. Xana and Ethan had been at a fraternity party that night. They returned home around 1:45 a.m., so by 2 in the morning, everyone was home. Kaylee and Madison on the second floor. Xana and Ethan on the third floor. The 2 other roommates on the first floor. All 6 people in the house, all alive. And then, sometime between 3 and 4 in the morning, someone entered that house, quietly, through a sliding glass door on the second floor that was left unlocked, armed with a large fixed-blade knife. What happened next would become one of the most horrific crimes Idaho had ever seen. The next morning, November 13th, around 11:45 a.m., one of the surviving roommates called friends. She said someone in the house was unconscious and not waking up. Those friends rushed over. One of them called 911 at 11:58 a.m. when police arrived at 12 p.m. They found a scene they would later describe as the worst they'd ever witnessed. For students, all deceased: Kaylee Goncalves, 21, Madison Mogen, 21, Xana Kernodle, 20, Ethan Chapin, 20. All had been attacked while in their beds. The coroner would later confirm they died from multiple stab wounds. Some had defensive wounds, showing they tried to fight back. The 2 roommates on the first floor were physically unharmed. They had somehow slept through the attack. Moscow police immediately knew this was beyond their capability. They called Idaho State Police, then the FBI. By that afternoon, the house was surrounded by crime scene tape, investigators in white suits going in and out, news helicopters overhead, and the community of Moscow went into absolute panic. Within hours, the University of Idaho sent out alerts. Students were told to shelter in place. Parents started driving to campus to pick up their kids. Gun stores in the area sold out of firearms and ammunition within days. People who'd never locked their doors started installing security systems because whoever did this was still out there. At 4:25 p.m. that day, police held their first press conference. "We are investigating this as a homicide," they said. "We have no suspect in custody at this time. We are asking the community to remain vigilant. If you see anything suspicious, report it immediately." And that was all they could say. The investigation had just begun. Days passed, then a week, no arrests, no suspect named publicly. The pressure on Moscow police was crushing. National media descended on the small town: CNN, NBC, Fox News. Every major outlet. The case was everywhere. Cable news covered it 24/7. True crime YouTubers and podcasters picked it up immediately. And the internet did what the internet does. Amateur detectives started combing through social media. Reddit threads exploded with theories, TikTok videos analyzing every detail, and people started pointing fingers at the surviving roommates, at ex-boyfriends, at random students who happened to be in the area. It got so bad that Moscow police had to hold press conferences specifically to clear innocent people. "This person is not a suspect," they'd say. "Please stop harassing them." But the public pressure kept building. 2 weeks after the murders, police still hadn't announced any arrests. but behind the scenes they were working around the clock. Over 100 officers from multiple agencies. They'd collected more than 1,000 tips, interviewed hundreds of people, reviewed thousands of hours of security footage from businesses and homes in the area, and they were looking for one specific thing: a white Hyundai. Security cameras near the King Road house had captured a white sedan driving past the area multiple times between 2:45 a.m. and 4 a.m., circling the neighborhood slowly. On November 25th, police released a public statement. "We are looking for the occupant of a white Hyundai Elantra model years 2011 through 2013. This vehicle was seen in the area of the homicides during the early morning hours. If you know of a vehicle matching this description, please contact us immediately." That white Elantra became the key. Meanwhile, at the crime scene, investigators had found something crucial. Next to one of the victims, they discovered a tan leather knife sheath, kebab style, the kind used for military or hunting knives. But the knife itself was gone. The killer had taken it with them. On the button snap of that sheath, forensic teams found male DNA, touch DNA, a tiny amount, but enough. They ran it through CODIS, the national DNA database. No match. They ran it through local databases. No match. So they turned to a newer technique: genetic genealogy. The same method that caught the Golden State Killer in 2018. They uploaded the DNA profile to public genealogy databases like GetMatch and started building a family tree, tracing distant relatives, narrowing down possibilities. It took weeks of painstaking work, but slowly, they closed in on one person: Bryan Kohberger, 28 years old, PhD student in criminal justice and criminology at Washington State University. Washington State University is in Pullman, Washington, just 8 miles from Moscow, Idaho, a 10-minute drive. Bryan had moved to Pullman in August 2022 to begin his doctoral program. Before that, he'd completed a master's degree in criminal justice at DeSales University in Pennsylvania. He'd spent years studying crime, how criminals think, how they'd get caught. He'd even posted online research surveys asking people about their experiences committing crimes. Questions like, how did you prepare for the crime? What were you feeling at the time? Did you have any remorse after? At the time, people thought it was just academic research. Now, looking back, it feels very different. When investigators started looking into Bryan Kohberger, everything started clicking into place. He owned a white Hyundai Elantra 2015 model. His cell phone records showed he'd been near the King Road house multiple times before the murders, at least 12 separate occasions, starting in August 2022, driving past late at night. Why? Investigators believe he was stalking the victims, watching them, planning on the night of the murders. November 13th, Bryan's phone data told a very specific story. His phone pinged cell towers near his apartment in Pullman until 2:47 a.m. Then it went dark, turned off, or put on airplane mode. At 4:48 a.m., it came back online, and it pinged towers showing movement south, away from Moscow, back toward Pullman. Right during that window, 2:47 a.m. to 4:48 a.m., was when the murders occurred. But there was something else, something even more damning. One of the surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen, told police what she'd seen that night. Dylan had been on the first floor. Around 4 a.m., she heard what she thought was Kaylee playing with her dog upstairs. Then she heard crying. Then she heard a male voice say something like, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." She opened her bedroom door slightly to look, and she saw a figure dressed in black clothing and a mask, walking toward her, bushy eyebrows, athletic build, about 5'10", 6 feet tall. He walked right past her door, toward the sliding glass door at the back of the house, and left. Dylan stood there frozen, in complete shock. She went back into her room, locked the door, and didn't come out. She didn't call 911 until the next morning. Why? Investigators say she was experiencing tonic immobility, a freeze response to extreme trauma. Her brain couldn't process what was happening. It's a survival mechanism, and it's completely involuntary. She is not to blame. When police showed Dylan a photo lineup weeks later, she couldn't definitively identify Bryan, but she said the man she saw had very bushy eyebrows, just like Bryan Kohberger. On December 30th, 2022, 7 weeks after the murders, police made their move. Bryan had driven cross-country to his parents' home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania for the holidays. FBI agents and Pennsylvania State Police had been surveilling the house for days. At 3 a.m., a SWAT team surrounded the property. They arrested Bryan without incident. He didn't resist. When they searched his apartment back in Pullman, they found it had been deep cleaned thoroughly. When they searched his white Hyundai Elantra, same thing, vacuumed, wiped down. Recently detailed, but investigators took samples anyway, and they took a DNA sample directly from Bryan, a cheek swab. They compared it to the DNA from the knife sheath found at the crime scene. It was a match. Statistical probability, 5.37 octillion times more likely to be his DNA than a random person. That's a 5 followed by 27 zeros. Bryan Christopher Kohberger was formally charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. If convicted, he faces the death penalty. His extradition hearing happened in early January 2023. He waived his right to fight extradition. He was flown back to Idaho and booked into the Latta County Jail. He's been held there without bail ever since. In solitary confinement, his arraignment took place in May 2023. Bryan stood before the judge and said nothing. He refused to enter a plea. So the judge entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. Since then, the case has been slowly moving through the court system. Pre-trial hearings, motions, legal battles. Bryan's defense team has been fighting aggressively. They've filed motions to suppress evidence, motions to change the venue out of Latta County, arguing he can't get a fair trial there, motions to remove the death penalty as a sentencing option. They argue the evidence is circumstantial. They say the DNA on the knife sheath doesn't prove Bryan committed the murders. They say cell phone data is unreliable and doesn't definitively place him inside the house. They say the eyewitness description from Dylan is too vague to be credible, but prosecutors aren't backing down. They say the evidence is overwhelming. DNA at the crime scene matching Bryan. Cell phone data showing he was in the area at the exact time of the murders and had been near the house 12 times before. His white Hyundai Elantra matching the description of the vehicle seen on surveillance. An eyewitness who saw a man matching Bryan's description leaving the house right after the murders. And they say there's more. In court filings, prosecutors have mentioned additional evidence they haven't made public yet. Evidence they're holding back for trial. What is it? Nobody knows. But it's described as significant. The trial was originally scheduled for October 2023. Then it was delayed to 2024. Now it's set to begin in 2025. It's expected to last several months. Legal experts say this will be one of the biggest trials in Idaho history. The prosecution has thousands of pages of evidence, witness statements, forensic reports, surveillance footage, phone records, DNA analysis. The defense will argue that Bryan is innocent, that the evidence doesn't prove he was the one who committed these murders. But most legal analysts believe the prosecution has a very strong case. The combination of DNA, cell data, vehicle identification, and eyewitness testimony is powerful. One of the most disturbing aspects of this case is Bryan's background. He wasn't some random stranger. He was a criminology student. He'd spent years studying how criminals operate, how they'd get caught. He knew about DNA evidence. He knew about cell phone tracking. He knew about surveillance cameras. And investigators believe he tried to use that knowledge to get away with murder. He turned off his phone during the attack. He cleaned his car and apartment. He tried to eliminate evidence, but he made mistakes. He left the knife sheath with his DNA on it. He drove past the house multiple times before the attack, captured on surveillance cameras. His phone data placed him in the area. And those mistakes are what will likely convict him. Another chilling detail is Bryan's academic work. Before the murders, he posted an online survey for his research. He was asking people about their experiences committing crimes. Questions like, how did you choose your victim? How did you approach the crime scene? What emotions did you feel during and after? Did you have any remorse? At the time, it seemed like legitimate academic research. Now looking back, it feels like something else entirely. Was he studying for something, preparing? We may never know. The families of the victims have been incredibly strong throughout all of this. They've attended every court hearing. They've spoken to the media. They've demanded justice. Kaylee Goncalves' parents, Steve and Christy, have been especially vocal. They've fought to keep the case in the public eye. They want the world to remember their daughter, not as a victim, but as the vibrant, loving person she was. Kaylee was 21 years old. She was majoring in general studies with a focus on IT and cybersecurity. She loved her dog Murphy, a golden retriever mix. She and Madison had been best friends since 6th grade. They did everything together. And they'd just made plans to move to Austin, Texas. After graduation, they'd found jobs, found an apartment. They were so excited about their future. Madison Mogen was also 21. She was studying marketing. She worked part-time at a Greek restaurant in Moscow called Mad Greek. Her co-workers said she was always the happiest person in the room, always smiling, always kind to everyone. Xana Kernodle was 20 years old. She was studying marketing and information technology. She was passionate about her education. She'd recently started dating Chapin. Her family described her as having the biggest heart, someone who would do anything for the people she loved. Chapin was 20 years old, a freshman. He was one of triplets. He was studying recreation, sport, and tourism management. He didn't even live at the King Road house. He was just there that night visiting Xana, his girlfriend. Wrong place, wrong time. For young people, for futures stolen, all in one night. The King Road house where the murders happened has since been demolished. The University of Idaho purchased the property and tore it down in December 2023. They said it was too painful for students to see it every day. It had become a dark landmark. People were taking photos, making TikToks in front of it. It was disrespectful to the victims' families, so the university removed it. In its place, they planned to build a memorial garden, a place to remember Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan. The trial is expected to begin sometime in 2025. The prosecution will present their case. The defense will argue for Bryan's innocence, and a jury will decide. If convicted, Bryan Kohberger could be sentenced to death. Idaho still has the death penalty, execution by lethal injection or firing squad. The last execution in Idaho was in 2012, but this case is different. For victims, premeditated, brutal. If there was ever a case for capital punishment in Idaho, many believe this is it. Of course, Bryan is presumed innocent until proven guilty. He has the right to a fair trial, the right to defend himself, and his defense team is doing exactly that, fighting for his life. But the evidence is strong, very strong, and most people who followed this case believe justice will be served. One question that haunts people is, why? Why did Bryan allegedly do this? What was the motive? Prosecutors haven't publicly stated a motive. They don't need to prove motive to get a conviction. But people want to know. Some theories suggest Bryan may have been obsessed with one of the victims, that he'd been stalking them. Others think it was a thrill kill, that he wanted to see if he could get away with the perfect crime. As someone who studied criminology, maybe he thought he was smarter than the police. Maybe he wanted to test himself. We may never know the true answer, unless Bryan speaks, unless he confesses, or unless evidence at trial reveals more. What we do know is that 4 innocent lives were taken, 4 families were destroyed, a community was shattered, and the entire nation watched in horror. The surviving roommates, Dylan and Bethany, have had to live with unimaginable trauma. They've been harassed online, accused by conspiracy theorists of being involved, blamed for not calling 911 sooner. It's been cruel and unfair. They are victims too, survivors carrying a burden no one should have to carry. The University of Idaho has worked hard to heal. They've offered counseling services, they've held vigils, they've tried to move forward while never forgetting. But the scars remain. This case changed Moscow, Idaho, forever. It shattered the illusion of safety. It showed that violence can happen anywhere, even in the smallest, quietest towns. As the trial approaches, the world will be watching to see if justice is served, watching to see if Bryan Kohberger is held accountable, and watching to honor for young lives that ended far too soon. Kaylee, Goncalves, Madison, Mogen, Xana, Kernodle, Ethan, Chapin. Their names should be remembered, not his. This is their story, and this is the fight for justice. Guys, this was the story of the Idaho student murders. I know it's heavy, very heavy. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If this case impacted you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and take care of yourself. Take care of the people around you, because stories like this remind us how fragile life really is. Until the next video.